Hello, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me. I so appreciate it. And I hope that this will be an informal time together. It feels very comfortable to be with family and friends. So, round of applause for you guys for stepping up for me and Sylvia. You guys are fantastic. Thank you, guys. So, a few thank yous, and then hopefully we'll be able to riff today. Thank you for being teachers and teacher leaders. Thank you for being committed to our keiki. It means the world to me because, from my perspective, what you do is you magnify the good things about our state. You make sure that our children are actually cared for, and I know that you are leaders among teacher leaders, and you've made so much of your life to commit to taking care of our keiki. So I appreciate you from my heart. I appreciate Osa, who embraced me, who's been there by me, and who really just wanted me to be real with you over these many months. I don't know if you realize this, I haven't shared this with Osa or anybody before, but my father was a school teacher, a public school teacher in the Union in New York State many years ago when I was a really little guy. And he spent 2 years as a school teacher. He wishes now that he had done it longer. He ended up working with my grandpa after that. So we've had teachers in the family across the country, and then Jamie's family is completely saturated with public school teachers here across our state, and vice principals, people in teaching in immersion schools. So we come from a teacher family. So I first wanted to say thank you for welcoming me, and thank you for knowing that we are committed to you. So the thanks should go on because you did something special for us. You believed in me, and I was on the phone with Sylvia Luke just minutes before I came in through the door, and she wanted me to thank you too, because yes, this is political season. Yes, this is a time where we make change. We are going to see what the state looks like going forward, but we're completely committed to public education, and that has to be first and foremost on our minds and on your minds. So I'm here to convey that before I start telling whatever stories I can come up with. Okay, so thank you for that. It has been a long couple years, without a doubt. And that made it even more important to me to be able to be here, to share time with you, to be at your back. It was not your typical last 2 calendar years at all. It's always a difficult job to be a teacher, to be a leader for young people. And now to be there in front of them when they are carrying a virus along with everybody else and sneezing and coughing on you, and we're asking people to do things that may never have been contemplated when we debated what benefits we should have as teachers, things that we had never negotiated, things that were of deep concern. I recognize that, and I want to thank you for keeping it together for our keiki when things were so tough. We just did not know. We didn't know what we were dealing with on so many days. And it was my job as your lieutenant governor, which historically is a totally useless position. Please don't tell Sylvia, because it's not really true. But in this particular case, it became a little bit more relevant, because as fate would have it, being a family doctor and an ER doc, it made a little bit of a difference, I suppose, to be able to have knowledge of what we're facing and what we might face. And I got there because of people like you. And this is the part of the story that I want to share with you. But that's after I thank you for being frontline workers, essential workers, call it what you will, but being there right in front of a lot of people that needed you to help them to understand that we were going to get through. So you were fantastic during the COVID pandemic, and here we are, as we emerge out the other side, things will be a little easier. It won't always be easy. We still don't pay teachers enough. We're going to have to do much better on that. We're trying to, thank you. We're still sorting our way through the disparities when you've had so much experience, but maybe you didn't get that step, or there was compression that didn't quite make it up there. So we have to sort through that, because if we pay teachers right, and you are feeling valued and welcomed as professionals, you will be happier in your jobs, although I see a lot of happy teachers, because I think teachers love to take care of the education of the children in our state. But it'll be easier to afford houses. It'll be easier to make sure the next generation comes back. It'll be easier for us to support our kupuna, who may be in our homes living. All of these things, it will be easier to support the classrooms themselves when you come out of your own pocket, as I've seen so many times before from wonderful public school teachers. So thank you for that generosity. Now I'm going to share with you a little bit about what my past was because it's relevant to what teachers have meant to me. Forgive me if I've shared any of this with you before. I've seen so many of you as you've been wonderful with me for these many years as I've gone through the State House and State Senate. But I didn't start easy. And I think that Osa knows some of this story, but maybe you others don't. I was born in upstate New York, 1970. But for the first 2 years of life, I didn't meet most of my milestones. I didn't speak. I was behind. And my parents, who I was their first child, they didn't know what to make of it. We checked out all of the things that you do, but it's hard until you're kids too. You don't really know what may be in front of them. So as the months and years ticked on and I wasn't speaking, they became deeply concerned. And so at first they felt that I had some sort of severe disability. They just didn't know. It turned out, once we found a good family doctor, that I was deaf. And being deaf had a profound impact immediately in my family because they didn't know then what the consequences would be. Would I have to have special classes? Would I ever be able to function in public school, which ultimately I spent my entire education in public education, entirely in public schools, a little place called Quaker Valley High School. But what they did do is they got me good care, and I got good developmental care, and I was very lucky. I was one of the few that with the congenital defects I had, I was able to get my hearing back before I was 3 years old, sometime a few months after my second birthday, actually. And so after surgeries and getting my hearing back, my parents needed to help me catch up. Because you lose those first couple years, you lose all the early language skills, you lose your ability to be attentive, you really lose a lot. And so what was their decision? Their decision was to put me into public schools immediately, to find teachers that could rally me, to find an education that would get me caught up. And it was not simple, because once again, when you miss those milestones, you really need a lot of extra attention. And I tell you this story because you will know that when I become governor with your help, I will focus on early development, I will focus on education, I will focus on supporting our public school teachers, because it was those early teachers. First one was Portia, was her name, who quickly saw that I was going to need a lot of language help, and I was going to need a lot of speech therapy, and they got me that therapy. And I didn't catch up for many years. Then it was Miss Locke, who was my kindergarten teacher. Beautiful silver hair. I had a crush on about all my teachers for the first 5 years, until I got to Mr. Cunningham. Who was a nice guy, but not my flavor in that case. So Miss Locke helped me as a kindergarten teacher, and I was very actually moved by the discussion about testing, because for all of those years, all the way till I was 8 years old, I always tested well below what I was capable of. And they constantly bounced me up through the 3rd grade, when my teacher was Miss Peters, into classes that really were the slower classes, as they used to say. And that was very difficult for me, because when you're young and you've had to wrestle with a disability and people are telling you that you're not capable, it was a challenge. In fact, I'm going to share a little secret with you, which I think my opponents have now learned. It made me fiercely competitive, because all those years people were telling me I couldn't do things, or I was going to be behind, or I was going to be slow, or I wasn't ready for the better classes. And it was really just a matter of catching up. And so every student we know catches up on their own time. That's why we support special education. That's why we support extra support in the classrooms when we have a big class, when we have so many people that just really need our attention and we may not be able to give it if it's too challenging in a hot classroom, or a classroom that's just overflowing with students because we don't have enough resources. So I know what that means, and that's why I'll be focused on this from personal experience. So through Miss Peters, I'll tell you a story about Miss Peters. Miss Peters had just the greatest heart ever. She was so funny. And she told me about her high school boyfriend, who she still kind of allowed to have to say. And her high school boyfriend was Robin Williams, the comedian. And Robin Williams had this profound effect on her, this kind of almost spiritual effect on her. And this is the teacher that at that grade really was a motivation for me, because that's the year I finally realized that I was going to be able to turn the corner, that I wasn't going to be held back, because I caught up finally at age 8. Then came Mr. Cunningham, who I did not fall in love with, it's true, after Miss Peters. But then my fifth grade teacher, Mrs. McCabe, Diane McCabe, and Diane McCabe was the teacher that said to me, you're going to thrive in school because you work hard, because you compete hard. And that's what I was expressing. I competed so hard because I felt with the proper encouragement, I ought to be able to thrive in my public school and in my life. But no one gave me that chance when they judged me and when they said, you're behind, you're too slow. I was catching on. I was realizing that I could do well with great teachers in public school. But Miss McCabe gave me the math book. She said, you seem to be really good at math. And I was a good math student, actually. And she let me do my entire year of mathematics in 1 week. Because she said, if you can do it, I will advance you. I will make sure that you get what you need in my classroom. So that was the moment at which I realized that if I applied myself with great support from my public school teacher, I would be able to thrive. She also gave me my favorite book of my youth, The Hobbit, and it began to open up that fantasy world for me. Amongst all of the other times when people say we are not creative, maybe we don't give children opportunities in public school, that was an absolute eye-opener for me. I remember that year so well. And so I got lucky and I got to go through public school and had motivational teachers from then on. I always had great teachers. I remember Gene Klein. Gene Klein was my history teacher and our soccer coach when we were growing up back in Pennsylvania. Gene was one of the best European and American history teachers I ever had, and he took us in as friends. I look back now and I think they seemed to be, these were our elders and so on. They were like 6 or 8 years older than us only. They were almost peers. And I'm 52 years old now, Gene's only 60 years old. But I realized that it was really not that great a difference. And he really embraced our class and helped us feel in many ways like equals with him as we learned. A gentleman named Ed Schroth was our biology teacher and our research sciences teacher, and he taught us to thrive in competition in sciences. Several of us ended up winning Westinghouse scholarships and going on to college because of that. That was the how I got into my college, which really changed my life forever. Because all of these teachers really made all the difference in my life. They never, ever stopped sacrificing for me and my classmates, my dearest friends, who I'm still close to. Jeff Hayes, Alan McCune, who helps run my campaigns. He was my classmate in public high school for 10 years. These are friends that were forming bonds with us. We sat next to each other in this little public school outside of Pittsburgh for all those years together with all of these wonderful mentors. So as I think back, it's just so humbling to know that I'm looking out at the Ed Schroths and the Mrs. McCabe's and the Miss Locks and the Miss Peters, because I know that that is who you guys are. That's who you are for all the people of Hawaii. And so really we thank you, because I know from my experiences how you are inspiring other people to go and move forward. And if I had not had those good teachers, I would not have ultimately been able to pursue medicine, because it was that conflict I had, that inability to hear, the healing I got in my public schools that got me ultimately interested in healthcare. So I became a doctor, and it was a National Health Service Corps posting that sent me to the islands. That's how I came to Hawaii. It was with the National Health Corps back in 2000. I put my hand up and I said I'd like to have a job, probably at first in some inner city. They send a guy like me, a young Jewish doctor. That's what we firstborn Jewish kids do. We go to medical school, as you know. I figured I'd go to Philadelphia or New York or somewhere where they typically would send a doctor from the East Coast, and there just were no spots that year. And so who would have thought? They said, well, there's a spot in northern Maine you could go to. There's a place in the federal penitentiary system you could go work in Oklahoma City, and then there's a little place in Hilo called the Bay Clinic. Where do you think you'd like to practice? And I was like, oh, this sounds good to me. I'm going to Hilo. I hesitate to tell you, I had never been to Hawaii before. And so when I put my hand up and they said, okay, you're going to fit just right into the big city of Hilo, I was like, all right, I'm going. So I'd had this education and these opportunities, and I became the doctor in Hilo. Bless you. The only problem was, the day before I arrived there, the doctor in the metropolis of Kau quit. And so they said, Green, this is going to be just right for you. You just drive down to Ka'u, 65 miles to the south, it's on the left, and you're going to see your clinic. So I got down to Ka'u, and I became the doctor for 8,000 of our citizens. And with a little public school just down the street, the Ka'u Elementary School in Nalehu, and in Pahala, the school there, and I started doing school physicals for the kids. That was my introduction. This was in July of 2000, so they were just getting ready for their football programs and track and all sorts of things. And so they were the first people I met, the public school students in the community. I had some fun experiences. Some of them were quite colorful in those early days with some of the high school students because they were giving me a little, the grief, which was appropriate. But I became the doctor for essentially 4,000 Filipina and Filipino patients and 4,000 Hawaiian patients and about 15 witness relocation patients that were living in Ocean at the time. And so I began to learn what Hawaii was like. But people were kind to me, and they took me into their lives, and they took me into their hearts, really, as the doctor. I was on call for 4 years. And I met incredible people. I met one gentleman who shared his time between Hawaii, really living in Pahala, and the other half of the time that was spent in Alaska. And this gentleman came to me married to this beautiful person, about 4 feet 2 inches tall, this Inuit woman, and I had never seen a couple like this before, mixed ethnicities like we see in all of our school classrooms, and I didn't know what to make of them. She, who I first thought was very local people living in the countryside, I didn't know they would have such skills. She was a PhD in physics. It was amazing. He and the part of the story is sad, he developed what I diagnosed on our first visit, terrible lung cancer, which was going to take his life in the course of a few months. So I would go deliver his hospice services at his house. Brilliant man. Now he was an engineer and a pilot, and not a smoker, by the way. So how do you imagine he got that cancer? I wish it was that simple, although that's normally the way, secondhand smoke. Well, this guy was a pilot, a bush pilot, and he would fly from atoll to atoll in the Aleutian Islands half the year when he wasn't living here. He was the guy that de-iced nuclear warheads in Alaska. And of course, that has incredible possible consequences. And so I got to know him, and he had this cancer, and we began to care for also his wife, who had sent their kids through public schools. All 4 of them were either doctors or lawyers, by the way, from that family. Very, very, very intellectual, smart people. And I learned from them that there were all kinds of people out there. The day that he passed, actually, he told me he knew he was passing. It was true. He said, "Green, be careful. I'm giving you some presents. Don't kill yourself." And I went out to my car kind of tearful because I knew he was right. He was going to pass at home. And on the top of my car was a kayak, and in the passenger seat was a spear gun that he gave me as a present. And it was just quite something, to have that experience from good local people. But I saw what they wrestled with. They wrestled as a community without access to, in some cases, schools that were well enough funded. They certainly wrestled with not having mental health care or drug addiction treatment or trauma services. So that's when I ran for office. I ran for office because I thought that people deserved a little better. So went door to door for 7 months. You guys endorsed me, which was amazing. A week before the election, which I was sure I was going to lose, it came out that my opponent was a cocaine dealer, and I was able to win that first election. A very fortunate way to run for office if you are trying to break into the system. But then it was years of learning, and it was time with you and working on these programs, actually making some small difference, passing tobacco taxes which paid for healthcare and trauma services, making sure kids with autism get the real care they need, making sure that we don't disparage them or short them on services that they deserve. And those fights are ongoing, without a doubt. I'm sure many of you are special education teachers or advocating for the students in your schools or wrestling with the DOE to find a way to make that work. And so you're going to have my cell phone. You're going to be calling me and saying, "Green, what on earth are we doing? Why are we not helping this person or that?" Remind me to remember my roots in Ka'u and on Big Island. I was there this morning, actually, saying thank you to people. But I got to serve in the House and Senate because of you. Then came lieutenant governorship, which, as we all know, was a good battle. There are very good people that ran for office. And I feel fortunate because we won by a tiny little margin. Probably because HSTA and a few others just said, hey, we're going to take a flyer on you because of whatever reason. Not my good looks, probably my humor, I'm fairly certain. But together we've had this adventure these last 4 years, and we've come through what I see as likely the largest challenges we'll ever face. But as we look out the other side now, as everyone in the world seems to want to visit Hawaii, and hopefully spend their money here, I would propose, we have to find ways to make this system work for us. I'm not here to talk about complicated policy. I'm not here to try to convince anyone of anything except the following. Pick people that you care about, that you think care deeply about others in our state. Some of the ideas will revolve on bringing new resources here for what we need. We're talking about a climate impact fee, which is to say you pay when you come to Hawaii, so we have resources for our keiki, for climate change, for our parks, for these things. And we have resources that don't tax our system, so when you come to the legislature, it's not sorry we don't have resources, wait till next year, wait till next year. It's time that we look at the fundamentals, that we educate children when they have need, that we support the schools and our teachers, that when children have literacy challenges in that early phase of life, that we maybe give you an extra teacher if at all possible in the classroom where it's needed most. Call that primary promise. Things that I will come to you for advice on, not the other way around. And so we'll do these things, and we'll make priorities of housing. You can be sure that housing has to be, in my mind, one of our very top priorities, because why don't we have enough teachers every year? Because they can't afford housing. Why don't we have nurses every year? Because they can't afford housing. Think of firefighters and all these good people that really work strongly in the middle class, but it's just so hard. And so that's the corner that we want to turn. We want to turn that corner where it's actually affordable to live in Hawaii, that when we have children or we have nieces or nephews or whomever we have in our lives, that instead of having to go to the mainland and never coming back, that they come and they stay and they enter our profession. That we as mentors, when we put out and we try to educate them and tell them what we believe, that they do follow in our footsteps and they actually can, because they can afford to live here, and that they know Hawaii is really one of the most extraordinary places in the world to live. And so that's my goal. And I will wrap up by saying this. Jamie, the love of my life, who I met 1 week after getting elected. That was really the best part. It wasn't beating the coke dealer or getting into office or becoming lieutenant governor, which was all very cool, I have to say. But I met Jamie 1 week after coming to Oahu, and we started having children, we got married. Strike that, reverse it. And we've been able to create a life together, and we want it to be good for our children. It's like Sammy, who's at Voyager right now. And it's just so special to know that you guys are there, whether it's a charter school or traditional public school or any school here. I value you as teachers, and I value my in-laws as teachers, and I just want you to know that it's our goal, Jamie and mine, and anyone who would join this adventure, it's our goal to really value people for the hard work that they commit to, and we want to help be there so that we support you just enough so that you can keep inspiring the rest of the state. And that will be my role for 4 years if you'll have me. So thank you so much for indulging these stories, and I just want to say I love you very much.